So therefore, they looked for other basalt. They found some further away from the sample and dated those and selected 17 of the 26 samples they dated because they came up in those 17 samples with an age of 4.4 million years. The other 9 samples gave much older dates. Since they didn't agree, they threw them out and said they were contaminated and discarded. The primate skull, known as KNM-ER1470, was also given an initial age of 212 to 230 million years, which according to the fossils was considered way off the mark. So over the years, an age of 2.9 million was finally settled on, only an order of magnitude lower, because of an agreement now between several different published studies, although the studies involved selecting good samples from bad samples once again to come up with a number that they liked. However, preconceived notions about human evolution could not cope even with the skull being that old. And so a study of pig fossils in Africa readily convinced some anthropologists that the 1470 skull had to be much younger. After this, they widely accepted further studies, went back and studied some more rock in the area, and came down to 1.9 million years. Again, several studies confirmed this date. How many studies do you have to do to get to the date you want to use? Okay. The forms issued at radioisotope laboratories, when you submit your sample, they commonly ask you how old you expect the sample to be. That's not a blind study, unacceptable science. Methods should work reliably on things of a known age. When you have volcanic rock from a volcano and you know exactly when that lava flowed and cooled, the test should tell you that's how old it is. I have seen no recorded example of a known lava rock that dates to the known date. One example is potassium argon dating of 5 historical andesite lava flows from Mount that one in New Zealand. Although one lava flow occurred in 1949, 3 in 1954, and 1 in 1979, the dates range from less than 0.27 million years to 3.5 million years old for these rocks. Using hindsight, it is argued that excess argon from the magna molten rock was retained in the rock when it solidified, and therefore the secular scientific literature lists many examples of excess argon causing dates like this to be exaggerated. This excess appears to have come from upper crust mantle below the Earth's crust. If excess argon can be used as an excuse, can cause exaggerated dates for rocks of known age, then why would I accept the test for rocks of unknown age? There's no other scientific method in any engineering or science field that would ever accept a test where you can't prove a known number but willingly accept it for an unknown sample. No other example of a test you would do that. Would you ever go to a medical lab and have them, well, maybe COVID testing's not a good one to go by. Well, we'll move on. Geologist Dr. Stephen Austin sampled basalt from the base of the Grand Canyon strata and from the lava that spilled over the edge of the canyon. And they have known dates of when that lava first flowed over the top of the canyon, I believe, in this sample. Well, I'll find out in a second. By evolutionary reckoning, the latter sample would be billions of years younger than the basalt at the bottom, right? Igneous rock at the top of the canyon should be much younger than igneous rock at the bottom of the canyon. The bottom was buried billions of years before the top transitioned. Unfortunately, through rubidium strontium isotope technique suggested, the recent lava flow was dated 270 million years older than the basalt at the bottom of the canyon. An impossibility. Different dating techniques should consistently agree. In the study of the Grand Canyon rocks by Austin, different techniques gave different results. Again, all sorts of reasons can be used to suggest for bad dates, but this again is posterior reasoning. Techniques that give results that can be dismissed just because they don't agree with what you think they should be, you cannot believe to be an objective method to be considered in the first place. In Australia, some wood is found in tertiary basalt that has clearly been buried in the lava flow. It was charred, on the surface. The wood was dated by radiocarbon dating, 45,000 years old. Of course, the lava, potassium argon, dated to 45 million years old. Isotope ratios of uranite crystals from the Kungara uranium body in the Northern Territory of Australia gave lead-to-lead isochron ages of 841 million years, plus or minus 140 million years. And this contrasts with an age of 1.5 to 1.6 billion years based upon other isotope ratios, and ages of 235 million years, 61 million years, 0 million, and 0 million, and 0 million. They were under a million, using thorium-lead ratios. So 5 samples were dated by various methods with ratios all across the spectrum of dates. Even one of the more reliable methods, which is potassium argon, has been shown to have serious flaws. Samples from Mount Etna in Sicily, when the rock was formed, it was in 122 BC. Yet potassium argon came up with dates 170,000 to 330,000 years old. From Mount Etna in the lava flow that occurred in 1972, 210 million years to 490 million years. Mount St. Helens in 86, up to 2.4 million or 2.8 million years. Halolai in Hawaii occurred back in 1800, 1.32 to 1.76 million years. That same mountain in New Zealand up to 3.5 million years, and Gleiki in Hawaii, 1.7 to 15.3 million years. Why would anybody accept a method that can't date things of known age and assume it's correct for things of unknown age? Though radiometric methods are the most popular, there are hundreds of uniformitarian methods that could be used to date things. So why would radiometric be the most popular? Well, because they're the ones that give the oldest dates. So a study has been done where you look at all the potential uniformitarian dating methods by Dr. Henry Morris. He compiled a list of 68 different uniformitarian estimating methods for the age of the Earth. When he came back around, he ended up plotting 67 of those, because one he came back and felt was too reliable, or too unreliable because of the ranges to really substantiate one range as a potential number to work with, so he threw it out. So remember, the current accepted secular age of the Earth is 4.5 billion years. Of those 67 uniformitarian methods, 23 of them say the Earth is less than 10,000 years old. 10 say between 10 and 100,000 years, 11 say between 100,000 and a million, 23 say between 1 and 500 million, nothing over 500 million years. And yet there's the full range. Nothing is anywhere close to a billion except for the radiometric methods of the various isotope mixes. So even using uniformitarian methods that are non-isotope options can give you a range, but nowhere near the size of the dates that come from the isotope methods. Now, frankly, these 23 would fall in line exactly with the biblical record. So what happens with these? Once again, uniformitarian still assumes a known beginning, nothing in the process that would have changed over time, an isolated process that would have nothing escaping or nothing entering on from exterior, which can change how these things balance out. So, if the dating methods are wrong and the Bible is right, then there really was a global flood with an ark full of animals, including dinosaurs. First question is, if there's going to be a flood, where did the rain come from? Enough rain to flood the entire earth. Well, Genesis 7 says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, on that day all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of heaven were opened, and the rain fell on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. So it's something about springs of the deep burst forth. Water can get superheated by volcanic activity and boil rapidly, and by doing that, explode up into the air through lava breaking through the crust of the earth. Also, There is a discussion about subterranean waters that could have also been superheated when things caused this to all start, and they would have boiled up through the top crust, through the oceans, and throwing water and debris into the air. Do that continuously for 40 days, and it gets into the atmosphere and rains for a long time. Not only raining, but enough to then settle the continent because of subterranean escaping out from underneath the continent, actually allow things to settle, and then water flows in from the sides as well. So most came from water being thrown up from the ocean. As God caused the earth plates to collapse, ocean waters or even subterranean waters boiled and blew up in the atmosphere with a lot of dirt, causing rain and darkness. That eventually caused also changes in the environment such that you would get an ice age as well. Pangea. The majority of the collapse of the earth crust could have been on the opposite side of the earth. Okay, if Pangea existed as one continent, which I have no reason to believe it didn't, the pattern of fossils of certain creatures seem to connect in bands that logically span across where the breaks in the continent would be. You know, evolutionary scientists have made these statements. Quite logical, no reason to disagree. Go ahead.
It would also make sense how they got the kangaroo on the ark. That's a common atheistic argument against the flood.
Right, yeah. The animals that are currently in Antarctica or in Australia, well, how'd they get to the ark? Well, because they didn't exist on separate continents at that point in time. It was one landmass, correct. So the plates continued to move for 4 or 5 months until much sediment had settled, and then the plates hit each other, forming the mountains that we currently have. Impact of other plates caused general plate lift and mountain formation. Water runoff creates the land formations we see today. So there's Pangea, and there's the breakup and movement. It's just a theory. I'm not going to say it did happen, but I have no reason to say it didn't. Mainly because it's still quite acceptable. The only difference is the speed at which it happened. In my viewpoint, if it did happen, it only took, maybe 4 to 5 months for the main continents to move 2,000 miles. They hit and things slowed down. When they hit masses that heavy, inertia, especially when you get India and Africa and Europe hitting simultaneously, the biggest mountains right there in the Himalayas, so that's when they were formed. Noah's Ark. So we're claiming that there really was a global flood with an ark that was used to save human and animal kind, and all of the cultures of the world descended from one family. Okay? So your family of 8 get off the ark, and the 3 kids and their wives start having kids. All the nations of the world came from people who had an oral history going back to a flood. Okay? So would you not assume that there should be at least some level of a flood cultural story in the history of all cultures? Okay? Whether it's deemed now as legend or mythology, shouldn't there at least be something that would tie them all together? Well, they do. A study has been done and found over 300 documented flood legends around the world. And even many evolutionists have concurred that that number could be as over 500 legends of a flood around the world by different cultures. This is a chart showing areas where they have various flood legends, and then the main events or features of the flood legends to see how they correlate across all the different cultures. You've got here that man is in transgression, the divine destruction, that there was one family that was favored, that an ark was produced, that there was destruction by water, that the humans were saved, the animals were saved, universal destruction, landing on a mountain, that a bird was sent out, that the survivors worshipped, and that there was divine favor afterwards. Some of these, destruction by water, every single one of the cultures has it. Humans were saved in most, only one really doesn't mention that humans were saved, which would be strange. I'm not sure how you could have a culture without the humans being saved, but So just a simple fact that cultures in all these areas, Persia, Syria, Asia Minor, Greece, Egypt, Italy, they all have cultural histories or legends that include a flood. Why would that be that way unless there's a strong potential that it really happened? The Hawaiian culture. Their culture has a history that says Nuhu built a large boat to save his family from a flood. When the boat landed safely on Mauna Kea, Nuhu offered pig and coconuts to thank the moon. So the Creator descended on a rainbow to reveal that he was the one who saved mankind. So obviously the details are slightly different, but the concept still occurs in the cultural history. For the American Plains Indians, giants in the earth offended their creator, Tirawa, so he drowned them in a flood. Then he made the first man and woman who became the ancestors of the Pawnee people. Pawnee. Peru, the creator Viracocha, sent a flood to destroy the unruly giant he had made. Only 2 giants survived in a boat, which landed on Tiahuanaco. The Creator then made animals to fill the earth, and he made people from clay. Hudson Bay Indians, one of the gods became angry at the giants and decided to drown them in a flood, but he warned a man to build a large canoe. The man sent out an otter who retrieved dirt from which the man remade the earth. Scandinavian, when Odin killed the first frost giant, Ymir, his blood deluged the earth. The frost giant Bergelmir and his wife survived in a hollowed out tree. Tanzania, God told men to take seeds and animals onto a boat so they could survive a mountain-covering flood. These men sent out a dove and then a hawk to see if the earth had dried up. The Akkadian culture, angry over human noise, the gods decided to flood the earth, but the kind goddess Ea warned them to build a cube-shaped ark, sort of unique ark shape, to save his family and the animals from a worldwide flood. Western Australia, Gajara and his family survived a worldwide flood on a raft. He then sent birds out to see if the waters had receded. Pleased by the smell of cooking kangaroo, the god Nadaja placed a rainbow in the sky to stop the rain. Curious what cooking kangaroo smells like. China. When a sky god flooded the earth, a brother and sister survived on a boat. They had a deformed child, which the brothers cut into pieces. The earth was repopulated from the pieces. Sort of an interesting viewpoint of a legend. So, many examples of cultural stories of a flood that sort of bears the argument once again. The logic would be that if there really was a flood and all cultures came down from one family, it's quite logical that every culture would have some sort of oral legend tradition that a flood occurred. And that's what we find. So Noah's Ark. If there really was an ark, how big was it? And would it have been large enough for all the animals? Well, the big question is going to come down to realizing Genesis 6:15 says it was 300 cubits by 50 cubits by 30 cubits. The big question is, how big is a cubit? In general, from the elbow to the finger. But I'm sure there are people here who have a longer elbow to finger than I do. In fact, it's sort of been construed as charted out here. Okay? You have the Hebrew short cubit, starting as low as 17.5 inches, up to the Egyptian long cubit of 20.6. We do not know for certainty which one was used by Noah, but we can make the following assumptions. Okay? Older structures like Solomon's Temple, they use the long cubit. Okay? So it's somewhere between the 19.8 and 20.6. Newer ones like Hezekiah's Tunnel, they know for sure that that was measured with a short cubit in the 17.5, 17.6 range. Thus, the general consensus is that most likely it was a long cubit because it's an older used cubit that would have been associated with Moses coming down, and he would use the dimensions that would eventually have gotten to Solomon before it got changed later on. So using the 19.8 to 20.6 range for the long cubit, you end up with an ark that is 510 feet long by 85 feet wide by 51 feet tall as measured at the water line in terms of the length and the width. So, compared to ships of historical relevance, the Ark was a good-sized ship. Okay, Queen Mary the II, the Titanic, Wyoming, Santa Maria. The question is, Noah's Ark was built with wood, gopher wood, whatever that is. We don't really know for sure. 510 feet long. The longest wooden ship of modern times is the Wyoming. So the question is, could a wooden ship actually be built this large? Okay, set aside the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, which actually is built to scale. Many have compared it to the schooner the Wyoming. From jib boom to spanker boom, it was 450 feet. So all the way from boom to boom. Okay. Built in 1909, she sailed until she sank in 1924. She sank in heavy seas with all hands. She did twist quite a bit. That was a complaint by the sailors at the time, and flexed in heavy seas. So, in general, the consensus is 400 is really about the maximum for a wooden ship, as built the way the Wyoming was built. She was designed to sail. The Ark wasn't designed to sail. The Ark was designed just to float. She also used 1800s technology for shipbuilding, which in reality was not as good as ancient shipbuilding. Okay? Shipbuilding of the 1800s was around the concept called carvel holes, and that's where you build a framework of ribbing and you attach planks to the outside. So the ribbing provides the structure and the planks just provide the outer shell. And so as you can see here, an engineer would tell you, you attach these on here, you attach fasteners in between the planks to the uprights of the framing, susceptible to raking, matchboxing. Okay? So as they move back and forth, the joints and the gaps become loose. Okay? In fact, that's where the term gets, got to keep a tight ship. Because as you start raking, those gaps open up and you start to lose integrity. Okay? And so actually the generally accepted number has dropped as much as down to 330 feet for the maximum length of a ship you can get to handle seas. Noah's Ark. Ancient shipbuilders designed the holes that better utilize the strength of wood, not the joint. Raking occurs because you've got a plank of wood this way and a plank of wood this way. The only thing keeping that joint or the planks on the outside from moving is the fasteners at one joint and the fasteners at that joint. The wood itself is just independent of each other, and they move back and forth. And anybody in engineering is going to tell you that the moment arm of a piece of wood compared to a plank this way, that's not the way to engineer something if you want to control flexing in a ship. So, CRISO here, it's the Navy architects at a world-class ship research center in Korea. They ran a study. And using the strength properties of wood, they calculated what size planks would have to be used, assuming you could actually generate a structure that would utilize the strength of wood, not the strength of the joint. Okay? How thick would the shell have to be and how thick would the beams have to be to allow a ship of this size. They came back and said that the planks were 12 inches thick on the outside and the beams were 20 inches square. A ship could be built 500 feet long that would be extremely seaworthy. In fact, they ran studies in water tanks and verified that a ship of this size could handle seas of scale up to 98 feet. That's pretty huge seas. Question is, how would you build a ship with 12-inch planking that would use the strength of the wood versus the strength of the joint? Mortise and tenon planking in ships is a well-known technology that goes back to at least the 14th century BC. Problem is, it takes a lot more time to build a ship this way. Carvel ships were fast to build. Okay? In this case, each board is fastened to the next board with an extreme number of tenons and pins so that the strength of the wood is attached to each other from beam to beam to beam. Ships of antiquity. Ptolemy's fleet, Pharaoh of Egypt, from 283 to 246 BC. He had a whole series of sizes of ships. Now this is just a cross section of each ship by name. the pentacounter, the bireme, the trireme, the quadremes, or the A, B, and C. And these names associate with the number of people on the oars on each side, okay? So a trireme had 3 people on 1, 2, or 3 row stacks, okay? So they actually had ships where you had 3 sets of oars lining down the side with 1 man on each oar. They had various quadrenes with 4 people on 1 row, or 2 people on 2 rows, or a 1-2-1 for a quink. Actually, this is a 1-2-2 for a quinquereme. A 6, they called it by number, had 6, 12, 16. In fact, this shows how many he had of each of these designs in his fleet in this time period. This picture here goes up to 16. He had 2 30s. That means he had 30 men on the oars on each side of the ship. So within 1 row of oars that stuck out both sides, 60 men. Now multiply that by the number of oars down the length. These ships are getting pretty dang big.